Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore. It's time for another whiskey tasting, and today we are going to the world's most peaty whiskey, Octomore. And this is Octomore's 12.1. It comes in at a whopping PPM of 130.8. For those that don't know what PPM means, PPM is phenol parts per million, and that's a way to measure how peaty the barley is before distillation. And that's a key thing to know because you will have some whiskeys that have higher PPMs that actually don't taste as smoky as some whiskeys that have lower PPMs. And that all has to do with how they do the distilling, how they do the fermentation, all of that. There's a lot of steps that go into making whiskey, so no matter how smoky it is when it's barley, other things can happen throughout the process to kind of mellow it out. And that was my surprise because the first time I ever had something that was going to be Octomore, it was out of a barrel at the Bruichladdich distillery, and it was, of course, cask strength. And I was expecting, okay, this is going to be insane. It's just going to be a smoke. It's going to be smoke inhalation. It's going to be so heavy in smoke, and it was pleasant. It was like, wow, this is high proof alcohol. This is definitely the smokiest whiskey that I've ever had. But they actually, the two things kind of mellowed each other out. It seemed like that it wasn't insanely smoky, and it wasn't insanely aggressive in terms of alcohol levels. So, even though this is just about 60% alcohol by volume, and that will change from version to version, that is, it's amazing that it was really that drinkable. So now the most heavily peated that they have ever come out with, and it varies from version to version, is the 8.3, and that was 309 parts per million. And so this is almost a third of that, and something that people call a very peaty whiskey, Laphroaig, is 40. So, or 40, maybe a little above 40. I get different numbers on that. But think about that. 40 parts per million versus 130 versus 8.3 was 309. And Jim McEwen, legendary distiller for Bruichladdich, he's the guy that came up with this idea. And he really wanted to, rather than what they normally do with barley, is they'll get barley, basically some malted barley that has gone through peat smoke and some that hasn't, and then they basically blend the malt together to get it to whatever level of peat that you want. So if Laphroaig wants 40, then they're going to blend it down to get it to 40. And Jim McEwen said, just send me what you got, whatever you got. I'm not going to knock it down for this experimental whiskey, and I'm just going to release it as is, and we're going to see what it does. And from what I understand, their first experiments with this didn't go very well, but they definitely found the answers pretty quickly, and now we're up to series 12. So, and every series has a 0.1, a 0.2, and a 0.3. Some have a 0.4, and some actually do a 10-year. This is a 5-year whiskey. And so you would think, like with the Wee Beasties, that this is going to be somewhat aggressive, especially with the high amount of peat that is in this. So we may be in for a little bit of a surprise here. We'll see. Now, I like to say this is not a whiskey that you as a consumer are probably going to have sitting around as an everyday drinker, because a bottle of that stuff is going to probably set you back about $200. So it's not inexpensive whiskey. This is something for the person who is really wanting to experiment and widen their palate and understand things that they may not get to drink all the time. And so it's interesting, if you get to 12.1, then you're working with just ex-bourbon casks. And then as you go to 2 and 3, you start to get influence from other types of barrels, different types of barley. 3 uses Islay barley. And so it gives you an opportunity to try out and see what these different effects are to a whiskey. And so I have a bottle of this. I'm very thankful that Bruichladdich sent this to me. They sent it to me because I was on the team that helped launch this when it came out. And so, you know, I got a chance to taste it before everybody else and do a write-up on it. And it was great because it helped me, a larger bottle helped me really get acquainted with this whiskey. But truth be told, likely in my lifetime, I may buy 1 or 2 more bottles of this, but it's not something that I feel like I need to have around all the time, because all we're doing here really is trying to stretch the limits and see where whiskey can go. Whereas I know there are people who will buy like a 15-year-old Pappy, and then they always want to have a 15-year-old Pappy around because, you know, it's not going to be an everyday drinker because it's going to be really expensive. But there's this thing about kind of status, whatever. I have a bottle of 15-year-old around. You could buy this as a status whiskey, but I don't even think it works for that. I think this is learning what whiskey can be and really amping up a certain quality in a whiskey so that you can see how it compares to whiskeys that don't have that same amped up quality. So, all right, so ex-bourbon on this one. This is what they call their control whiskey. The 0.1 series is to let you taste really kind of without the influence of other barrels, but just what is this like in an ex-bourbon cask? All right, so this is definitely going to give you smoke, but it's actually not as smoky as something like a Wee Beastie is in terms of hitting the nose. Wee Beastie is really aggressive at a 5-year, and this one is kind of tamed back a little bit. What I love about the smoke in this whiskey is that they use Concerto barley. It comes from the mainland of Scotland, the Caledonian forest. And so it really gives you that autumn burning leaves kind of a smell, which is a really pleasant smell. So a lot of people might think, okay, Octomore is going to end up being very much of a medicinal. It's going to have that iodine character to it because it's coming from the coast. Well, think about it this way. The barley is not coming from the coast. It's coming from around Inverness, in that area, and so it's kind of sheltered from all of the weather that Islay normally gets. And then it's only spending 5 years in the barrel, so it's not getting as much time as, say, a 10-year Laphroaig or a 10-year Port Charlotte is getting. And so you're going to end up not getting as much of that sea influence on this as you would on other whiskeys, and it's apparent. It definitely gives you much more of a foresty, autumn burning leaves kind of a smoke. It also has a very interesting tropical fruit note to it. You get kind of a papaya nose to this. Maybe a little pineapple in there. So it's very interesting in that way. Cheers. Oh, it is definitely more refined, even at 5 years, than Wee Beastie is. Oh, some lovely flavors coming through. Hard to define that fast. It's like a kind of a rush of different flavors going by. Smoke is really nice. Again, maybe a little tarry, but it does still stay in kind of that char, burning leaves kind of an area. There's a nice toffee that comes through on this, along with the apple and pear. It's peppery. When it gets to a couple of seconds in your mouth, all of a sudden, as it heads towards that finish, this heavy pepper, black pepper comes in. The smoke is always there. On the finish, I'm getting again, it's kind of like it's more of a char influence, it seems, than what you would traditionally think of as a peat smoke on the finish. A little briny, but a clean finish, a nice clean finish on this. It's actually a really impressive whiskey for 5 years, that amount of amped up peat, and that the peat is definitely there from front to back, but it doesn't just blow your mind. It's one of those things where it just kind of sings along with everything else that's going on in the dram. I'm going to do another tasting of it because, as I say, sometimes you're overwhelmed by what you're experiencing that's very hard to define little flavors that are coming through. Stone fruit's definitely peach and apple, and that smoke, almost matchstick kind of smoke here towards the finish. What is different between this and another 5-year like Wee Beastie is this doesn't go for the bitter, and you don't get tannins. And I wonder if those tannins in Wee Beastie are likely coming from the Oloroso sherry barrel that it uses. And the fact that this is stuck in ex-bourbon barrels, and that's all that it uses, you get a little of the toffee from those bourbon barrels too, but it's subtle. So it's a nice combination of things going on here. The pepper stays with you. It's really nice. This is a dram that you're probably just going to want to drink on its own and not have it with food, because again, when you're in an experimental stage with something and you're trying to get the personality of the whiskey, other flavors being introduced, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. When we did our little profile on it, we said, you could put this with a fruit tart. I could see that. I could definitely see it with a fruit tart. And I can see it with seafood, and I can see it with steaks, that kind of thing. I think it would blend in. But I think you're cheating yourself if you spend $200 a bottle on this, and you're going to really introduce a bunch of other flavors to kind of cover it up, or maybe complement it. But I think the purpose of this whiskey is more to learn and educate the palate and understand how peat really can work at such high volumes in a whiskey. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And until next time, cheers and Slainte.